Jess. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Mark. I'm going to start my speech with the little spiel I usually give my patients. So I'd say, hi, my name is Jess. I'm a nuclear medicine technologist, and I'm going to be taking you through your scan today. What we're going to do is I'm going to put a cannula in your arm and give you an injection of a small amount of radioactive tracer. This tracer is a sugar, and we swap out one of the molecules in this just to a radioactive isotope. So that means it won't make you feel any different, and there's no side effects at all. And then the next part I'll say is, at this point, do you have any questions for me? And the most common question I get at this point is this one. Will I glow in the dark? Now, don't get me wrong, this question is usually said as a joke, and I'll laugh and I'll say, no, 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 unfortunately nothing exciting like that will happen at all. But is it an unreasonable question? And the answer is it's actually not. And it's not because radioactive things quite famously glow in the dark. Now, no, my patients don't glow in the dark in the conventional way we might think about it like this, which if you're into satirical superhero movies of the early 2000s, you'll get this reference, but otherwise don't worry about it. But I'm going to circle back to this. I'm going to go back to radioactive things glowing in the dark. So I'd say most people in the room are familiar with this. And even if you aren't a Simpsons fan, I'd say there's probably lots of people in the room who know who this is. So this is Marie Curie. She was a very famous scientist in the early 1900s. She was famous because she won 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different science fields, and at this stage, even now, is still the only person to have done that. One of those Nobel Prizes was for discovering radium, and radium very famously glowed in the dark. Now, radium has a few other things that make it interesting. It's radioactive, and it has a tendency to incorporate itself in your bone matrix if you ingest it. But the commercial application of radium was that it glowed in the dark, and so they started putting in things to make money. So they put it in like tonics that you would drink. It was meant to cure arthritis. They put it in face creams because it made you glow and apparently had anti-wrinkle properties. They put it in cigarettes. I can't explain that one. Toothpaste because it made your teeth white, right? Great idea. But the thing it was probably most famous for was they put it in paint, and they painted the watch faces and clock faces. Why? Because it glowed in the dark. Amazing. You could now read time in the dark. This was basically the new iPhone. So, no, it's not unreasonable to ask if I'd glow in the dark when I'm injecting radiation into you. But I do want to circle back to this. So, no, my patients don't glow in the dark in the sense that they don't give off visible light. So I'm going to explain that. When we talk about light, light is actually just energy. And we put it on a spectrum from low energy things being things like radio waves and microwaves, and high energy things are sort of the radioactive stuff that we think about, so X-rays and gamma rays. There's a very small sliver in there that we call visible light, and we call it visible light because that's what we can see with our human eyes. Anything outside of that spectrum, we can't see it. It's why we can't see radio waves, and it's why we can't see radiation. So, when I inject my patients with radiation, I'm doing that to make them radioactive. I want them radioactive so that they give off gamma rays, and I can put them in a scanner like this, which has detectors, which will detect those gamma rays, and I can get a picture. So no, my patients aren't giving off visible light that I can see, but my patients are actually giving off light. So they kind of do glow, which is very cool. Now, I haven't answered the broader question of why am I injecting radiation into people? I'm not some unhinged person. I am actually trained. I have a radiation license given to me by the Victorian government. But I'm sure most of you know we can already get pictures of people pretty well without injecting radiation. We have X-rays, right? So I'll just quickly explain the difference between conventional X-ray, which includes things like CT and CAT scans, and what I do, which is nuclear medicine. So with X-rays like this, we're primarily looking at anatomy, so where in the body things are. And the way we do that is we take a machine that generates X-rays. Now this is where things get a little bit confusing, because when we say X-ray, we often mean the picture. The picture actually is called a radiograph. Think photograph, but with radiation. The X-rays is that light, that energy. So X-ray machines have an X-ray tube that generate X-rays that go through you to a detector board behind you. If the X-rays go all the way through you, which they will in soft tissues and things like lungs, they'll hit the detector board and make a black spot. If they don't make it through you, if they get stopped by something, which they will get stopped by dense things like bone, they won't hit the board and they'll leave a white spot, which is why bones look white on X-rays and things like lungs look black. Soft tissue sits somewhere in the middle. Some X-rays will pass through, some won't, which is why they look grey. It's a grey area. So that's your X-ray. In nuclear medicine, we're doing almost exactly the opposite. Instead, we're injecting people with radiation and we're detecting what comes out. So our scanners don't make X-rays. They are just a detector. They're just to see the radiation that's coming out of you. The reason why we do that is because we want to look at physiology. So we want to look at how stuff works. We want to look at how well your kidneys are filtering blood. We want to look at how well your lungs are taking in oxygen. We want to look at how well your heart is beating. And so I have a good example of this, but first I just want you to look at this image and see, look how clean and clear and crisp it is. You can see spine, you can see ribs, lung, collarbone, beautiful. This is a nuclear medicine scan. Now, I'm sure there are some people who are generous who are saying, it probably just looks bad because it's really blown up. It's not, it just looks bad. Nuclear medicine scans look bad. Part of it is because of physics, but part of it is because, as I said, we're not that interested in anatomy. So what we're looking at here is someone will have injected a patient with a radioactive tracer that gets filtered by the kidneys. So we're looking at the kidneys up here. The kidneys are filtering that tracer and making urine and sending it to the bladder, and that's the bladder filling up. Right, so this is amazing. We can watch in real time someone's kidneys working. Mind you, this isn't actually real time, this is sped up. It's much slower than this. This scan I love. This is one of my favorite ones. So what we do is we take out some blood, we label it with radiation, and we give it back to you. And so what we're looking at here is actually a picture of someone's heart, or more accurately, the blood pumping in someone's heart. So here we're actually watching the left ventricle pump blood around the body. It's amazing. And so we can do all kinds of amazing things. We can get you to breathe in radioactive gas to look for clots in your lungs. We can put radioactive eye drops in your eyes to look at how your tear ducts are working. We can get you to eat radioactive scrambled eggs and watch how your stomach empties. Right, amazing. The other really amazing thing it can do is it can image cancer. And this is where I live. I work at a cancer hospital. I work with cancer patients and I work in cancer research. So this is that sugar scan that I was talking about in the beginning. And the reason why we use radioactive sugar to image cancer is because lots of cancers are growing very quickly. And because of that, they need lots of sugar, they need lots of energy in order to grow. So we can inject radioactive sugar, and that radioactive sugar will go to cancer cells. Now, this scan probably looks a lot worse than you think it is, but sugar goes to normal cells anyway, which is why we can see the brain up there. It is cut off, but that's the brain, that's normal. This trace is also filtered by the kidneys, so basically you pee it out, which is why we can see the kidneys and bladder there. The thing that is abnormal in this scan is that big black spot in the lung. So in all likelihood, I don't actually know the clinical history of this patient because I just got off the internet, but it's probably a solitary pulmonary nodule, we call, or a lung mass, lung cancer. And so what we're doing here is we're basically taking a big highlighter and highlighting that cancer for the doctors. The other thing that's really amazing about these scans is they give us metabolic information. So what that means is the more a cancer sucks in that sugar, the more aggressive it is. So we can sort of tell how nasty it is. Now, this type of scan is a non-specific scan, so we use it for a whole bunch of cancers. But the other really impressive thing that we can do in nuclear medicine is we can actually start specifically targeting things. And so I thank Georgia for giving me a really good introduction to this because I'm going to talk a little bit about personalised medicine. So what we can do is we can take a molecule that goes to a certain type of cell. And we do this already. We do this, and the example I'll give is prostate cancer. So someone out there has made a molecule that goes to prostate cells. They've tagged it to a radioactive isotope. We can inject it and we can image prostate cancer, specifically just the prostate cancer. And this is where my research is. So I will have researchers come to me and say, I've created this thing, and I think this thing will go to breast cancer. And I've tagged it to a radioactive molecule, and I want you to tell me if it does. And I'll take that, and one of the first things I'll do is I'll try and tag this to breast cancer cells. So I'll see if it goes to cells. And if it does, the next step is animals, because things don't necessarily work the same way in single cells as they do in a whole animal. And so I'll take mice that have breast cancer, and I will inject them in much the same way I would a human, and then I'll put them in my little mouse scanner. And I'll see if these traces work. So basically what that means is I've been bitten multiple times by radioactive mice. Unfortunately, no superpowers, unless we consider like anxiety one. And so the next really cool thing we can do, the next sort of step in this, is I've spoken mostly about imaging, but we can actually swap that imaging radioisotope with a therapy radioisotope. So we can use it to treat as well. So we can take that prostate cancer therapy imaging agent, we can swap out the radioisotope for a therapy agent, we can inject it into a patient. We already know it's going to go to the prostate cancer, and we can deliver really high doses of radiation just to the prostate cancer. And this is quite amazing, because this way we are targeting that cancer, we're not treating healthy tissue, and so patients not only have better outcomes, but they have much fewer side effects than things like chemo that sort of treat the whole body. Now, this is not a new idea. I want to bring us back to Ms. Curie here and her radium. Radium was one of the first isotopes that they started using for these sort of therapies. They used to put radium in a machine, and they'd put it quite close to a skin cancer, and they would shrink the skin cancer. Another thing that they'd do is they'd put it in little glass tubes and put it in women's cervixes to treat cervical cancer. Now, this worked because radium is very radioactive. The problem is radium is actually quite a nasty isotope, and so not only would it treat the cancer, it would also sort of burn all the healthy tissue around it. So we don't use radium much anymore for this. We actually still do use radium, but we use it for bone cancer instead. But these techniques were basically early day radiation therapy and early day brachytherapy. So we actually still use these techniques. We've just swapped them out a little bit. Now, I'd also be remiss to spend a whole talk talking about radiation and not talk about the fact that it can also cause cancer. So I want to bring us back to this spectrum. Radiation causes cancer in much the same way it treats cancer. So we send radiation to disease because it is this high energy. Now, it is a little bit more complicated than that, but to explain it further, I have to go into nuclear physics. So we're just going to leave it. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to say radiation is this high energy stuff, which means it can go through you. The problem is, because it is high energy and it can go through you, when it's doing that, it can cause you damage, which when we're trying to treat cancer is brilliant. When it's in healthy tissue, not so much. So on that, I want to give you a fun fact, and feel free to use this if you've got parents bothering you about why you're not married yet. If you sleep next to someone every night, you will receive a higher radiation dose than if you sleep alone. Now, the reason for that is because humans are actually already radioactive. I don't need to inject anything into you for you to be radioactive. We all are. And we receive a background radiation dose just existing, because lots of things are radioactive. The soil, the sky, almost everything. So, does it actually matter? Should we all be sleeping in single beds? No. Part of that is because the dose you receive from another person is so minimal it's almost negligible. The other thing is humans are actually really good at repairing damage from radiation because we are exposed to it all the time. Now, we're not perfect, and that's why we do get cancer. But we do receive a background radiation dose. And in Australia, it's the equivalent of about 75 Xrays every year. So every year, just existing, you are getting 75 chest X-rays. So to put it in perspective, that X-ray you got when you broke your arm when you were a kid, do you need to worry about the radiation? No, not at all. 76 X-rays isn't that much more than 75. But what about the scans that I do, that sugar scan? So these sugar scans actually do deliver a lot more radiation, in part because we also do a CT with our scans, and CTs have quite a bit of radiation. For perspective, these numbers are how we measure radiation dose. Don't worry about them too much, they're arbitrary. We're going to say that 1.5 number, that's your average person. So you guys in the community not working with radiation, you receive your 75 chest X-rays a year. Me, as someone who works with radiation every day, I receive about double that. Mind you, my limit is 7 times that, so what I'm occupationally allowed to receive according to the Australian government, so I receive well under that. So it's considered a safe limit. My patients, when they have one of these sugar scans, they receive 4 times their annual radiation dose. So they receive 4 years' worth of radiation in one day. Now, that probably sounds really scary, but I promise it's actually not, in part because it's just like if you lived 4 years longer. But also, your doctor, if you need one of these scans, your doctor has made a decision about your care and has said, at the moment, right now, this scan is the safest thing for you to do. The radiation is negligible compared to what else is going on, and you need to have this scan. So, I hope I've shown you a little bit of what radiation can do. Basically, I think it's amazing. We can do incredible things. And in the future, I hope that we can create more of these things, and by creating better technology, we can reduce the radiation dose we're giving to people, and hopefully deliver more of this specific targeted therapy that can not only cure cancer, but give better outcomes and reduce side effects for patients. I hope I've shown you that radiation's not the villain, it's not actually the big bad. I know everyone's scared of Chernobyl and atomic bombs, but those events are so wildly rare, you sort of don't need to worry about it. And even with scans like this, you know, radiation's kind of like everything. Is there risk involved? Yes, in the same way having a beer, eating McDonald's, or walking down the street. Yeah, there is risk. But are those things considered safe? And the answer is yeah.
Go to nerdnight.com to find a Nerd Night event near you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for our latest presentation.